Yeah, very good morning to you, all our guests in television land in Guyana. And I want to first of all apologize to our viewers for being unable to bring to you our program for last week, just simply because we were slated to have on some guests who actually asked us to put the program back for this week. And we had to quickly get in touch with the station, but we are kind of committed to ensuring that this program is conducted each month. As a result, we have arranged for it to be here this week. First up, I would like to tell you that on today's program, I have with me as a guest Mr. Vincent Alexander, a registrar at the University of Guyana, and also one who can be considered an academic in this country and also an authority on local government. Also, I would like to give you a quick outline as to what we will be looking at during this week on the program. First of all, we're going to be looking at some activities that the Burnham Foundation has organized and will be conducting during the period of this month. Then secondly, being its Labor Month, we will be looking at Forbes Burnham, his involvement in the labor movement in this country and his policies while he was in government under the umbrella of labor. Then currently, the topic today is this international inquiry that is being conducted, investigating the circumstances surrounding the death of Dr. Walter Rodney some years ago. And we will also be looking at the timing of this inquiry, the exclusion of the parliamentary opposition from the preparatory work for the inquiry, the terms of reference, the composition of the inquiry, and the admissibility of hearsay evidence at the inquiry. These are some of the things that we will be discussing on the program this morning. So I want to invite you to stay tuned while we look at these issues on today's program, The State of the Nation. I'm your host, Clayton Hinds. With me today, as I said, in the studio is Mr. Vincent Alexander, and for those of you who have been with us over the years, you would know that the Forbes Burnham Foundation has been engaged in a number of activities. And for this month, one of the highlights of our activities here for this month is an essay competition that will be conducted. In fact, we have already received approval from the Ministry of Education to have this exercise conducted. And from what I have gathered, there are two topics that will be addressed by students of the various schools in the catchment area for this exercise. I want to invite Mr. Alexander, who is also chairman of the foundation, to give you some insight as to what this exercise will entail.
Thank you very much, Clayton. As you correctly said, the Burnham Foundation continues to carry out various activities in keeping with its mandate, which is partly to educate young people, educate the nation at large on the works of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. Now, we know that we are now into the month of May, the month in which Guyana acquired independence. And so, as a part to give some basis for young people to have more knowledge about Guyana's independence, the foundation has undertaken to sponsor an essay competition. An essay competition which is referred to as an independence essay writing competition. Now, this competition for this year, we hope to have this annually, will focus on Region 4, schools in Region 4. In fact, the public at large, once they fall in the categories which we'll mention, can participate. But the focus will be the schools in Region 4, starting from the first form right up to the sixth form. And so we have divided them into two categories. Category 1 would be those students from first form to third form. The topic that those students will be required to write on is what is independence and why did Guyana struggle for independence. Now the hope is that this will give them some opportunity to do some research and therefore to acquaint themselves with the Guyana struggle for independence.
So is that this first topic will be for students in
first
form to third form?
Third form of the secondary schools in Region 4. So the idea is that they will have an opportunity to do some research, and this will come under their social studies, about generally what independence means and why we in Guyana struggled for independence. The second category would be for those in the 4th to 6th forms, and their topic would be different. The topic that they will be asked to write on is what is the difference between being independent and being a republic? Why did Guyana choose to become a republic? So here is the progression, the history of the country, and we're asking those in the higher forms to do some work in terms of understanding what the republic is, what's the difference between a republic and an independent country, merely independent in the context of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and what is it that motivated Guyana to move on from being independent to a republic. So that's for the 4th to 6th formers. Now, schools were closed, so during the course of this week, the schools will get the required notification of this competition. The students will be given essentially 2 to 3 weeks to write those essays. And at the end of the process, there will be a ceremony where we will announce the winners, and they will be given monetary prizes.
What's the duration you said of this?
2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks.
So we will be aiming somewhere at the end of the month to bring this to a conclusion and to have a ceremony where we will be awarding the prizes. As I said, the monetary prizes. In the case of the first category, those in 1st to 3rd form who will be writing on what is independence, why did Guyana struggle for independence. There are 3 prizes of 15,000, 10,000, and 5 for the best 3 essays. And in the second category, the prizes will be 10, 15, and 20,000 for the best 3 in that category. Now, these essays, when the students would have written them, and the schools will be duly informed, the place to submit them would be Clayton Labour College. That's the point of contact for submission of these essays, Clayton Labour College, so that they can go to one place and dispatch. The judgment will be done, and then we'll have the activity to award the best winner. So, to recap, the Burnham Foundation, as a part of its activities for the year 2014, and with specific reference to the fact that this is the independent month of independence for Guyana, will be hosting an independent essay writing competition. The competition is divided into 2 categories: students from Form 1 to Form 3 who will be required to write on what is independence, why did Guyana struggle for independence, and students from Form 4 to Form 6, what is the difference between being independent and being a republic? Why did Guyana choose to become a republic? And these topics will be distributed to the schools during the course of this week. Of course, schools will open this week, and there will be a reward for those students who are 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in terms of their submissions. Each category gets a monetary reward.
Why, Vincent, I just want to make sure, because that is a very interesting exercise, and you quite rightly pointed out that it is hoped that this exercise will encourage the young people to do some kind of research and at the same time get an understanding as to what is the difference between independence and being a republic, particularly for those in the higher category. I want to remind students who will be participating in this exercise from the high school, please to remember your point of submission is at Clayton Labour College. And of course, you, like Mr. Alexander said, you'll be rewarded in the 2 categories in monetary form for the 3 best essays in both categories. I want to really compliment the foundation for that exercise, and at the same time go right on to look at what Forbes Burnham involvement in labor. Of course, I know that Forbes Burnham has been an unswerving person in the labor movement in this country. And as such, being it's the month of May, the month of independence, I just want you to go back and tell our audience what you know and what has been the policy of Forbes Burnham and his involvement in labor in this country.
Yes, Clayton. Here again, we are into the month of May. The 1st of May traditionally is celebrated as Workers' Day, the day for labor in Guyana, and they did have their celebration. Unfortunately, quite a fractured celebration. I'm told there were 3 different places where the workers finally assembled to celebrate this occasion. Now, traditionally in the Caribbean, one would see that the political organizations have their birth in the labor movement. If one goes across the Caribbean, whether it's Jamaica, whether it's Guyana, whether it's Antigua, Barbados, one would see 2 things happening. One, political leaders emerging from the labor movement, and a nexus between the labor movement and political parties. And I think this is also a reflection of some of the heritage which we have, because one could say the same about Britain and the Labour Party and their relationship with the Labour movement. Mm-hmm. So that Burnham is no different. In many regards, one can say that Burnham also came through the Labour movement and then emerged onto the national scene as a national leader and as Prime Minister and then subsequently President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Burnham was active in Labour, and in fact, through that activity, he became a member of the Guyana Labour Union, the GLU. It should be noted that the Guyana Labour Union, the then BGLU, was the first registered union in the Commonwealth Caribbean, very first registered union, and he became the Secretary General of that union. And so he was active in the labor movement through the Guyana Labor Union until the time of his death. When he became Prime Minister, he didn't continue to be the functional leader in a sense. He was more of a ceremonial leader, but continued to associate and identify with the labor movement through the Guyana Labor Union, which he was initially a member, and became General Secretary, and then held that office more in an honorary position until the time of his demise. Now, but that's only one aspect of Burnham in terms of his evolution from labor. One could not speak of Burnham without speaking about his attitude towards labor as well. And one of the things which I think we should note is the way in which Burnham encouraged a united labor movement. Mm-hmm. Encouraged united labor movement. Labor has always had problems in Guyana, and all sorts of fracturings would have taken place. But one would see that the union now referred to as GAU was given recognition under the leadership of Lyndon Bob Sampson Burnham when he was the Prime Minister of Guyana. That union is known historically to be associated with the PPP, continues to be. But because of his strong belief that whoever represents the workers should be given recognition and that there should be a united labor movement, over time that union was given recognition and came into the fold of the GTUC. Of course, unfortunately, it's no longer in that fold, it's now in FITUC, but Burnham was able to create the environment where GAU could have held its rightful position in the trade union movement in this country and be a part of a united GTUC at that time. And so it is that united GTUC which provided an opportunity also for interaction with the government on matters pertaining to labor. So we see that, again, one of the outlooks of Burnham was that you had to speak with and speak to the representatives of the workers, their representatives in this instance, the GTUC at the umbrella level, and the various unions in relation to the various industries or sectors that they represented. And so there was a constant relationship going on between the government of Burnham and the labor movement in terms of issues of labor. One would have to admit from time to time there were differences, and that's only natural. But he always sought to engage labor in talks, in discussions, both in terms of matters of wages and salaries and in terms of wider matters pertaining to the climate in the employment and in the country at large. One could see that out of that also quite a few labor leaders like Burnham emerged into government as well. One could well remember Vincent who was from the Transport Workers Union, who emerged as Minister of Labor. One could also remember Denny, who was from I think it was the union that looked after the teachers of the secondary schools, that he also emerged as a Minister of Labor. Another aspect of Burnham and Labor was that he established a unit for workers' education. There was a unit established under the Ministry for Workers' Education, where essentially the government contributed to workers' education, both in terms of their knowledge of the trade union movement, their knowledge of industrial matters, and more general matters pertaining to occupation, health and safety, etc. So on the front of education, Burnham was very active, and because of that activism, we also saw the emergence of Critchlow Labour College. It was under the Burnham regime that provision was made for the allocation of land and the establishment of that college by the trade union movement, and for the state to provide the college the subvention so that the college could be in its own right, unrelated to government. The college was an independent body in its own right, involving in workers' education, and in fact giving some workers a second chance at the education they may not have had previously. So that was another one of the things that Burnham did during his time in relation to labor.
Yeah, I like that is a whole lot, and I think that, as you rightly said, as a result of his commitment to the labor movement, that these things were done. Today we see that the labor movement is very divided. Like you pointed out, that the last Labor Day activity, workers congregated at 3 different places, which ought not to be. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what do you think might be a recommended move to bring about unity in labor today?
Well, the question of unity has now gained a new dimension. Over all of the years, the issue of unity was focused on having one movement. And so the idea there was, how does one have the kind of constitution that would be facilitative of all of the unions in a manner that they felt that they were getting a fair deal, because one of the arguments of those who are outside of the GTUC is that they are large but don't have the level of representation to reflect their largeness. At this recent celebration of Labor Day, Mr. Lewis proffered a different concept of unity. His concept was that, look, unity does not mean all of us being in the same movement physically. It means that we can unite where there are commonalities. And so he's saying that, well, it's probably the exercise of the right of the freedom of association for different unions to be involved in different organizations, hence the GTUC. But that the unity of the workers should be reflected in these bodies, irrespective of their different organizations, having a common approach to issues that affect the workers, because irrespective of the fact that they may be in different bodies, there are issues that are common to the workers across the board, and that the unity should be reflected in these bodies coming together to represent the workers and put forward views and opinions and negotiate on the workers' behalf in relation to those matters of commonality. So, for example, a matter of a minimum wage in the country would be a common matter to all unions, and so they could come together and have a collective position on a matter like that. And so that is the new proposition of Lincoln Lewis on the question of labor. I would not venture a recipe myself. I think that it is up to the labor movement and its constituent parts to determine what's best. And certainly there is credence in what Lincoln said, that there should be commonalities and that the unity should be demonstrated more at the ideational level than at the structural level. It does not preclude a structural resolution. I think that's a possibility, a structural resolution, but I think that one may well argue that the main resolution has to be the expression of oneness in relation to issues that affect the workers at large.
I think my view, while it seemed to be complicated, like you rightly said, there is a possibility, is one of the new concepts now in labor, which is quite different to what Forbes Burnham kind of pursued, but like you said, there's a possibility. One of the current talk and discussion among the workers right now in this country, as I have gleaned from what happened on Labor Day, is this a question of contract employment in the government offices and ministries and state agencies. How is this? Some people feel that it is undermining the labor movement and labor unions and so on.
Well, let me first of all say that contract employment was not prevalent during the period of the regime of Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. During that period, the regime stuck to the provisions for public service and the regulation of the workers under the Public Service Commission, so that there was a situation of tenure. It's another thing which we kind of inherited from the British, but security of employment through tenure in the public service. We have moved away from that to some extent. There's a lot of ambivalence on the matter. A lot of ambivalence, but at the end of the day, what it has done is to remove a large chunk of our workers from under the ambit of the Public Service Commission. And what that does is it interferes with security of tenure. Those workers are in a tenuous position because they no longer enjoy the protection that is granted when one is employed under the Public Service Commission. They have contracts, and those contracts are renewable, and therefore, in a sense, these workers are no longer insulated from the politicians the way in which the public service was intended to be insulated, because the public service is supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to serve the government of the day in the execution of their policies, and they're supposed to be employed based on qualification and based on merit. And the commission is intended to insulate them from the politicians being able to dictate to them that they do things that are unprofessional, things that are partisan, because that's not the way the public service is supposed to operate. So this question of contract workers infringes that tradition of security of tenure and for the development of a professional cadre of public servants. Because, for example, with contract workers, there's no guarantee any longer that one could effectively climb the ladder to the top, because contract workers are brought in sometimes at the top, and so the career of those people in the public service could be stifled by that mechanism. Contract workers also seeks to extract a kind of loyalty because of the fact that the contracts could be easily not renewed, could be terminated. So it extracts a kind of loyalty which goes beyond the normal neutrality that is required of the public service. So that it also, in a sense, undermines the role of the trade unions, because these contract workers are, by and large, not in the trade union movement. So what you have is a large number of public servants not in the trade union movement, and so the government is able to use these workers at its behest when the trade union movement is trying to take positions in relation to terms and conditions of service, and to have a militant body of people taking action. That militancy is undermined because people who are on contracts are far more guarded in their involvement in anything militant because of the threat that can be posed by virtue of the nature of their employment. However, one should bear in mind that the idea of contract workers was introduced partly by Mr. Hyde, but it was not introduced in the manner in which it is now executed. When Mr. Hoyt introduced contract workers, it was supposed to be the higher echelon, where we could not attract the best of professionals, the most qualified persons under the salaries at that time. So he introduced contract workers to be able to
address the public service.
To attract to the public service highly qualified professionals. But he also, having done that, issued a circular which made it very clear that the minister should deal with policy matters and should allow the permanent secretaries to deal with matters of execution. So whilst he introduced the contract workers, he created a system that made it clear that the intention was not to bring in these workers to be beholden to politicians, that he brought them in because of their skills and their qualifications, but that they would now fall under the ambit of the permanent secretaries, and that circular has never really been withdrawn, though it is now observed largely in the breach. So that is when contract workers to some extent were introduced at the higher echelon. Now you hear about contract workers as drivers and maid cleaners and every category of workers, and some of these people do not know, unfortunately, that really they don't have to be contract workers, that they should be a part of the establishment. They're being led to believe that this is the only category under which they could be employed, and are in a tenuous position, because imagine people at those levels of maid cleaners and people like those, and not having a security of tenure, people with small salaries, no guarantee of what tomorrow holds for them. And we know in the labor movement, for a large extent, it's these people who have been the real foot soldiers of the labor movement. And so what in fact has happened, the power and the strength of unions have been undermined by taking these people out of that ambit into this thing called contract workers, where the people are themselves disadvantaged, where the unions no longer have access to them as militant workers, and so that the government now has in a position to virtually dictate what happens. And we have seen that this has been happening over the years, where there's no real negotiation that takes place, and salaries are simply, increases are simply announced across the board. Not to say that, not to ignore the fact that the contract workers do not fall under the ambit of that 5% increase necessarily. They have negotiated salaries which are relatively better salaries than persons of the same level in the public service.
Yeah, I want to remind our viewers that I will be opening the lines at the end of our discussion for you to make your contribution to this program. I know Mr. Alexander has said a lot in relation to the labor movement, and I want to take this opportunity. Like I said, we'll be moving on to the International Commission of Inquiry that is being conducted at the moment, to determine what was responsible, or who was responsible for the death of Dr. Walter Rodney.
Clayton, before we go to that, if you could make one other critical point, which should not be omitted, Burnham and Labour, the way in which Burnham had policies that sought to give to Labour non-monetary benefits. And if one looks across the country, one will see that a number of housing schemes that were established for Labour. One talks about the stevedore housing scheme, people who were working on the waterfront. Even at that level, they were afforded the opportunity to have housing, and a scheme called the stevedore housing scheme was created for them. We know of Tocqueville.
Tocqueville Trade Union Congress
really means the Trade Union Congress Village. And that is where a lot of workers were able to acquire their own homes at very, very low cost, and this was replicated across the country, so that there were ways in which Burnham also provided for non-monetary benefits to workers, and housing was a big area. You get the impression these days that it's only now that Guyana has housing that's sponsored by the government, but in fact, under the Burnham regime, the workers benefited significantly from housing under the terms and conditions that were not as demanding of them as they are today. Today, the workers have to buy state land to acquire their own homes. In those days, land was virtually gifted to the workers, who would then bind themselves into groups, and collectively they would build those homes with all sorts of facilities being granted by the government to facilitate the building of those homes. There were instances where people even were given food packages as they worked collectively to build their own homes. The environment is very much different in that regard today.
Well, the viewers will have an opportunity to call in at a later stage when I want to go to the Commission of Inquiry, Vincent. I'm glad I have you here today. The Walter Rodney Foundation, I want to go to a little point that they made when this International Commission of Inquiry was established. I want to read what I noted from them. The Walter Rodney Foundation, the International Commission of Inquiry, the foundation, that is the Walter Rodney Foundation, is committed to supporting the appointment and work of the Presidential Commission, such that the inquiry is conducted by a commission that is selected based on excellence, experience, and expertise, and that will conduct the investigation in a fair and impartial manner that avoids conflict of interest or the appearance of conflict of interest or any other impropriety. This is a statement that came out of the Walter Rodney Foundation when the Commission of Inquiry was established. Vincent, I want to go and ask you straight away the timing of this Commission of Inquiry.
Well, first of all, let me say that I don't think there is anyone who has objected in principle to the establishment of a Commission of Inquiry. And here is where the question of timing becomes an important question. Because the Parliament of Guyana in 2005 passed a motion against which no one voted, a motion which was initially tabled by the Minister of Home Affairs. There were some amendments which were submitted by the late Sheila Holder, who then represented the WPA GAP in Parliament. And that motion was passed without anyone voting against it, calling for an inquiry, paying tribute to Walter Rodney in the first instance, and calling for the inquiry.
In 2005?
Yeah, 2005. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the question that one has to ask, why is it that it took the government so long, between 2005 to 2013-14, to actually put an inquiry in place? One has to question. Here is the Parliament, which is the leading legislative and policy-oriented body of the country, unanimously agreeing that there should be an inquiry, and that inquiry is not established until 2014. But more than that, when it is established in 2014, one can sense an act virtually of contempt of the Parliament, because the country is told that this inquiry has nothing to do with the motion of Parliament, that this inquiry has to do with the request of the Walter Rodney family. Now, Parliament, as I said, is the highest body in this country. And here's the President saying, don't worry with that parliamentary thing. This is about Walter Rodney's family. And so it raises serious questions as to the conduct of affairs in this country, that the motion of the Parliament is swept under the carpet, no attention is paid to it, and then for whatever reason, an inquiry is launched in 2014 without any reference whatsoever to those parliamentary parties who would have been party to the motion in 2005, which called for the inquiry. And so to me that raises immediately a question of what is the motive, what is driving this inquiry, where once again in this country we don't seem to be able to do things collectively and united. The Parliament was united. It passed the motion. And every day we hear the government calling for the opposition to work with them. And they are clearly the ones in this instance who have refused to work with the opposition, even in a case where the Parliament, inclusive of the opposition, had agreed that we want an inquiry. They have gone outside of that and said, no, we're not working with you guys. But would want to tell this nation on other occasions that their objective and desire is to work with the opposition. This instance surely exposes that is highly propagandistic and rhetorical and not a sincere comment, because here was an opportunity. The base was already set for the entire nation and its representatives to go collectively to establishing this inquiry. And now we have an inquiry which is established by the President under provisions of the law, of course, but which ignores the possibility of a united approach to a matter of concern to this nation. So that one has to question the timing, because the timing seemed to have facilitated not involving the parliamentary parties who were quite willing. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the WPA, which is a part of APNO at this time, upon hearing about this inquiry, wrote the government indicating that they weren't consulted in the kind of involvement they thought they should be, and had not received a reply from the government. The government having gone ahead and said, well, we're dealing with Rodney's family, and therefore we are acquiescing to the request of that family for the exclusion of the political parties. But this is a matter that affects the entire nation. And here it is that the government, and for all intents and purposes the PPP, have gone ahead single-handedly to establish this. Now that establishment, of course, has to be based on some sets of terms of reference.
But Vincent, I want to see the impression being conveyed from reports coming out is that the government is trying to convey to the nation that they have consulted, even though they're saying is a request made by the Rodney family. The impression being conveyed is that they have consulted the opposition in terms of the preparatory work.
That's, from my knowledge, that's not correct. That's not true. That the president has exercised his prerogative to establish, and that they have themselves determined the terms of reference.
The terms of reference, we under that.
That too has become a matter of concern. You read just now what the Walter Rodney Foundation said, and I think it's important that one bears that in mind, because this is a body that is pro-Rodney.
Yes.
And they're saying, let's have the inquiry, but let's have it under certain conditions. Now, we have ended up with an inquiry that, in fact, has terms of reference that point to two sets of things. On one hand, the terms of reference require that the Commission receives testimony and evidence from interested parties to enable it to examine the facts and circumstances immediately prior, at the time of, and subsequent to the death of Dr. Walter Rodney, in order to determine as far as possible who or what was responsible for the explosion resulting in the death of Walter Rodney. That seems to be the core of the issue at hand.
Yes.
How did Rodney die? What were the circumstances under which he died, and what information is available in activities prior to the time of his death and shortly after related to this? That seems par for the course.
That's the core of the
But the terms here go on to inquire into who may have facilitated the departure of Gregory Smith from Guyana. And I think the previous terms would have catered for that after Rodney's death. And reporting the actions and activities, and this is one of interest, reporting the actions and activities of the state, the GPF, the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana National Service, the Guyana People's Militia, and those who commanded those agencies, and action against the political opposition for the period January 1, 1978 to December 31st, 1980. So we have an inquiry now, not about Rodney, but an inquiry about the arms of the state in relation to the opposition the political opposition. And I dare say that one could only interpret the political opposition to be the PPP.
Yes.
Because the WPA, though they were a party that was active, they were not a parliamentary party at that time. So that what the PPP is doing here is using this Rodney's inquiry to get something going about the way in which the police force, the National Service, the People's Militia dealt with them. Now, I am not saying that they dealt or did not deal with them, but this is completely out of context of the inquiry into the death of Rodney. And certainly we have called, there's been calls for a truth commission in this country that would deal with all the issues, not from 1978, all the issues from the 1960s disturbances and who were involved, and the thousands of people who have died in this country in the 60s up to recently in the 90s and even in the 21st century. And here we have this commission going outside of what one would perceive to be the real issue, but seeking to serve the interests of one group, when in fact all sorts of groups have complaints about the way in which the state apparatus is operated, and to determine, how is it we can get past this hurdle in the country so that we can get on with the business of nation building. And I think that I would echo the sentiments of the Human Rights Association. All this can do is to stir up division in the country at a time when we are more likely on the verge of a national election. So that this is another question mark that is raised about this commission. What's the real purpose? On one hand, you don't involve the parliament, you ignore them. On the second hand, you put in terms of reference. This is probably one of the reasons why the parliament was ignored, because they may not have condoned these terms of reference. So you're seeing a plot that's emerging here. You ignore people who may facilitate certain kinds of terms of reference. You then implant your own terms of reference, and the commission now seems to be very, the intent seems to be extremely self-serving. And that does raise questions. So I think the issue here is not whether people want a commission or not, but the issue here is what's the real motive behind exclusion on one hand and the creation of this kind of terms of reference on the other hand.
I want to go to very interesting points. I hope members of the public, you would call in, make your comments. The composition of this inquiry, composition of the commissioners.
Well, I think in some regards that could be the third leg of the plot. That could be seen as the third leg of the plot. Mm-hmm. We have in this commission one Sir Richard Cheltenham, Queen's Counsel Jacqueline Samuels Brown, and Queen's Counsel Synod Jagaram. Now, what has been discovered is that Sir Richard was a colleague, a batchmate of Walter Rodney at the Mona campus. But not only was he of the same period and probably of the same ilk, but he was occasioned to be involved in activities memorializing Walter Rodney, activities which were, in some regards, finger-pointing. And so we have justice here who may have been of a certain mindset on the Walter Rodney issue, now being the judge. And the issue here, I think, that arises one of conflict of interest. Where you have commissions like these, one has to ask oneself what in fact is conflict of interest. And I would like to put two propositions: that conflict of interest represents a situation that has the potential to undermine the impartiality of a person because of the possibility of a clash between the person's self-interest and professional interest or public interest. And therefore there is this question that Sir Richard, having previously been disposed to a certain view on the matter of Walter Rodney, may in fact even at the level of his subconscious, come into this rather biased, though he may attempt to exercise his professional being. More than that, on the question of conflict of interest, when situations like these arise, it requires a person who is called into service to make a declaration of the conflict or the thought or possible appearance of a conflict. So conflict of interest doesn't mean this person is going to be biased, but it means that this person may appear to the public or to other interested parties to be in a situation of bias. And there should be a declaration. I don't know that there was such a declaration, so I think that it's rather unfortunate. And one wonders whether in the third leg of the plot that the authors of the inquiry did not seek to have someone of like mind, though well appointed by virtue of the office that he holds, to be on that inquiry, so that even in a subconscious role may bring to bear that likeness of mind in those deliberations, and no one can deny the fact that the subconscious being could in fact be rather influential, even in allowing one to come up with very logical conclusions. There is one justice, I'm not quite sure, maybe Denim, who made the point that very often what lawyers do, they make a determination of what the decisions they want to arrive at would be, and then they find the logic to support that decision. Of course, a lawyer has to do that because very often they defend even guilty people, but they seek to prove them to be innocent. So that poses a problem. The fact that Sir Cheltenham has been selected, the possibility of likeness of mind, and the fact that no disclosure was made. He seemed to have forgotten where he sat a few decades ago in relation to this matter.
I think the question
of interest also is the fact that another member of the panel, Sinat Jairam, has been recently associated with the government in a case against the opposition. One of these cases that has to do with the parliament and
the cutting of the budget.
And the budget cut. And so again, without one making any accusation against Mr. Justice Jairam, the issue of conflict, given the possibility of likeness of mind and the possibility of bias, does arise. And so you have clearly on this commission two persons, well appointed, but not making declarations of the possibility of the appearance of conflict, and who may postulate that they were professional, but who may well be psychologically disposed in a manner that may lead them to subconsciously invoke bias in this issue.
I want to, very interesting, I see the time going, but I want to get some in for the viewers to make some calls. One of the areas that have been talked about as well is the admissibility of hearsay evidence to this commission.
Oh, well, the plot continues. I've identified three legs of the plot. Now, you're going to have a lot of hearsay, so you're going to have a lot of people coming there. It's not evidential. And in there, people have been affected and all of that, and they're very emotionally expressing views that are not supported by fact. And this commission is intended to dwell on those views. It's not even circumstantial evidence that we're talking about. We're just talking about mere hearsay. So we've set up a commission that is going to be highly anecdotal. It's going to be one of the most institutionalized occasions of folklore that we're going to be engaged in terms of this commission. And anyone can go and give evidence, and so the chances are that a lot of people who are very emotional, very passionate, will go there and just speak their mind rather than provide any factual basis. And when you take all of these things linked as a complex, one can see that there will be difficulties. You started off with a commission that is not nationally supported because of the various sectors being excluded. Then you go on to a commission where you have terms of reference that are skewed to look after the interests of the party that established the commission. Then you have people with likeness of mind and association with you who are sitting in the commission. And then you allow the whole nation of naysayers to come in to give evidence. And you see already the amount of publicity being given to this kind of, so that there's an attempt here, a commission that will not find anyone guilty, a commission that will not punish anyone, a commission, however, that will, by virtue of all of these people coming forward and speaking their minds, inject more poison in an already divided society.
Well, that's a lot. And I have 10 minutes more. I want to invite members of the public. You can call in now, make your comments, make a contribution to this program. I am glad. I just want to remind you what we have covered. We have covered the activities of the foundation for this month. I see the lines are going. Morning, you're on the air. Morning.
Yes, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, sir.
A word on the Walter Rodney inquiry.
Yes.
One of the things that I would want to see, as Mr. Alexander said, that the opportune time is to create a diversion on the minds of supporters of the political parties as to how to vote. They are seeking out of this to cast blame. But I would want to see what can bring a true end to the Walter Rodney sincere is that Walter died through his own carelessness. Because as aspiring politicians, he should have known to take better care of himself than to what it is said has happened to him. Had he done that, he would have still been amongst us. That's how I put it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks very much. Yes, I was saying that we have covered the activities of the foundation. Morning, you want to hear?
Hi, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, sir.
I'm listening to your program, but my day is so spoiled to know that taxpayers' money is being used to put together a hearsay commission.
112 million.
And it is not being used to do an inquiry which was pertaining to Sasha debt, which was under this government. Taxpayers' money not being used for listen to hearsay with Roger Khan when he was here. That other people overseas had to bring him to justice just to inform him about what was existing in our land. With taxpayers' money ain't got respect. You just wake up and decide whether you're going to do this with that. When you're done, you're going to tell the same taxpayers you can't get more than 5% increase.
You must understand.
And another somebody in the regime going to tell you the people living good after that, they're happy, they eat good. Then the same people going to turn around and shoot in the same poor black people for little ice. Little ice. After promising them you could get a loan if you want to go and wind down, not for go and buy a piece of land. All you hear you mention about land, I would like them to make the comparison with land in Burnham time as to now. In Burnham time, land and house ain't I don't do it $1,000.
Yes.
$1,000 is the extra large. So they land alone for poor people, they got to talk millions. I think taxpayers got to come together and form, if possible, the one party and let the people know that now how we want our money spent.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your contribution. Yes, we have been looking at our activities for the rest of this month, our essay competition. I want to remind those high school students in Region 4 who will be participating. Your area to submit your essay is Critchlow Labour College. You must make sure that it's there. We are giving you prizes, monetary prizes for the first three best essays in the two categories that we have talked about. Also, we have been looking at the essay, some other thing. We have covered the issue of Forbes Burnham and Labour and his contribution to the labour movement in this country. And then we just concluded looking at the International Commission of Inquiry that is being conducted into the death of Dr. Walter Rodney. The lines are still open. Those of you who have been listening to the program, we are inviting you to make a contribution at this time to this program. Yes, again, Vincent, the caller just made a point in terms of the taxpayers' money being paid for hearsay evidence at a commission of inquiry, and he has pointed out other areas that necessitated a commission of inquiry in which none was done.
I think the point that I would like to make here is that this money was approved by the Parliament, and it's not one of the things affected by the so-called cuts, because really this year there have been no cuts. This year I think the Parliament has responded to the Chief Justice's ruling that you can't cut, you have to disapprove. So whatever in the lot is affected, even though you may not want to affect it, because you can't cut, you have to disapprove. But the opposition supported the funding, which clearly shows that in principle they have no problem with an inquiry, and I think no one can have a problem with an inquiry into Walter Rodney's death or to any death. In fact, we need plenty of inquiries for all the deaths that we have suffered.
Like you rightly pointed out, the Parliament had approved the holding of a commission.
2005.
Morning, on here.
Hi, first good morning to Mr. Alexander and Mr. Hinds, my namesake.
Yes.
Okay. Gentlemen, this program we are having here, we don't know how important it is. The reason why I'm saying this to you, a lot of young people today, Bossman, Mr. Alexander and Mr. Hinds, don't listen to these programs. I could tell you, if you check a lot of youths nowadays, they're going to put Charles Assembly 2, or end up in the BBM, or end up in the nets. If the seniors like me, or the other ones will be looking at this program, call it making intelligence suggestions to you all. So what I'm saying to you, you just keep doing what you got to do, and then inform the nation so that they could understand. Programs like these here, is to teach them to love ourselves, even not Indian or black, we will love ourselves as human beings. At the end of the day, if we love ourselves as individuals, we won't be going anywhere, sir. It's initiated with Walter Rodney, as I call and say, that he did the wrong thing at the wrong time, and what does it? I remember Mr. Luncheon on television telling people, you're the wrong person at the wrong time. I never hear in life that you're telling a human being that you're the wrong person at the wrong time. How in heavens people thinking? A man, remember now Mr. Alexander, Mr. Hinds, just bear with me. Years ago you say, hear about these things. You should only hear a man lash a man. Now you see this on television. Actually, they're claiming that PNC bully people. Now if PNC bully people now, and y'all know these things, y'all come to the stage of PNC do account to how they're thinking. All they're saying that Burnham was a bully. Now it's the same thing account to how they're thinking, but Burnham do the same thing they're doing. Now you people protesting, you bring police, lock up, shoot up people, police, shoot up James Bond, shoot up a lot of people. What do you call these kind of things? The kill Sabiosa. They're saying that the amount of people get locked up for Sabiosa, Mr. Alexander, the amount of people get locked up and get beat up for saying it's them is a love. So they had the massacre at Registrar, they had the massacre at Bartico. Who's the person behind these things? The amount of drug busts, the amount of illegal, the amount of junkies on the road, it's under which regime these things happening? Mr. Alexander, Mr. Hinds, I remember as a small boy growing up, I used to see people on the road mad either by education or domestic problem, or people say overall as opium. Nowadays, 95% of people on the road is junkie because of smoking what? They mean drinking coffee or drinking milk or study for one mad. It's drugs, it's cocaine. How the cocaine, which we plant cocaine in our country? We don't plant cocaine. We plant rice, we plant sugar, we do backside. How the cocaine, which we need to figure out?
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good man. Yes, our times happen to be running down on us. I see the lights are on, but I will take this other call. Morning, on the air.
Yes, good morning to you, sir.
Yeah, we're running out of time. You just got to be a little quick.
Yes, I just want to know, I just want to make my comment on the Commission of Inquiry in Rodney death.
Yes.
If this commission have the capacity to pronounce on this thing, if this is an investigative committee, or this committee is going to bring the conclusion on assumption, because we don't know if this commission have a capacity to investigate this matter fully, or if this commission have the capacity they are going to on assumption, because most I see that is based on assumption, and people saying this, people saying that. People, do they have to bring people who they say was responsible? They must have people in authority that they could call. An investigative commission will call people to the commission who they know was in position, authority at the time, in certain position to give certain facts. Because if everybody go and say, I was there, I know this, I know that, what are we going to say?
Well, that's the point Mr. Alexander made, is open season.
That's going to be an assumption committee. You're on based on assumption that I say this, you say that, we say this.
All right.
We make a decision. Or if this commission have the investigative capacity to investigate. Because it's just 3 men, as far as I am concerned, are there
2 men and a woman.
2 men and 1 woman to pronounce on this. But do they have people to investigate some of these allegations or things we'll say by people to know if it is true? That is my comment, sir.
Okay. I think
the important point to note here is that the commission will not, and no one will be found held guilty or responsible for anything said or done in relation to Walter Rodney. So the objective here is not to punish anybody for anything. Everybody will go scotch-free. The objective here seems to be the political motive of getting people to think in a particular way on the eve of elections.
Good morning. If the panel has
running out of time, so you got to be late.
Panel is biased, why participate?
That's your question.
Well, some people participate and some are not participating.
Well, the PNC.
From what I heard, the PNC said they're not participating. What they're doing, I think they have lawyers in there who are looking at their interests, but they are not themselves submitting themselves to the Commission of Inquiry.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I want to say thank you to our viewers. Now I see our time is up, and I want to thank you for your contribution. I know that you have listened to the outline, you have listened to what we have covered. I want to remind the students who will be participating in this, our activity for this month, the essay competition, that you should do your best. 2 categories, why independence, the difference between independence and republic. You can submit your essays to the Crichelo Labour College.
We'll be giving information to schools during the week.
Yeah, during the week, the schools, since the school will be open, the schools will be having the information for those who would be willing to participate in this exercise. I want to thank our viewers once again, and I want to remind you that come the next 4th Sunday of this month, that is May, we'll be having another program, The State of the Nation. I'm your host, Clayton Hinds. I want to thank Mr. Alexander for being here today. I was hoping to have another member of the panel, but unfortunately could not have been here. But I want to guarantee you, come the 4th Sunday, The State of the Nation will be back on the air with your host, Clayton Hinds. Thank you very much.